you are new here, let me give you the rundown along with my shorter form content. I also play Warhammer multiplayer competitively. I cast my games live while playing them, and my commentary is very similar to my edited videos. Now, if you're just looking for the matches, I have the timestamps down below for you to skip ahead to. And lastly, the intro. This tournament series takes the best players on my ranked ladder, a quick battle system that I programmed myself with leagues and matchmaking. I'll be playing two, but if I get knocked out, I will move on as a caster. So there we go. Nice and simple. And we can actually dive in now into the actual matches. First things first, though, let's go ahead and change the screen blocker to the actual tournament bracket. It should edit in just a second. No, not yet, but let's go ahead and change that. But yeah, you guys can always feel free to skip ahead if you so wish, since usually there's a bit of downtime as the tournament actually gets going. But there we go, there's the bracket. It's going to be a nice small tournament today between myself and 3 other players. So we'll see if I manage to win it this time around. When did I get a haircut? Yesterday. And apparently it was a really lucky haircut, because all of a sudden the channel absolutely exploded, at least with the 2 most recent videos. So that's been pretty nice. I do plan to release more content of a similar format, so should be pretty exciting. But yeah, I feel bald. I feel quite bald indeed, as yeah, I lost like a couple pounds off of my head. Kind of look like the guy from Ginger Root. What is this? Let me look it up. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Ginger Root. No, it's just showing me the root. I don't know what I was expecting, but anyways, it looks like the delaying is basically done. My opponent is in. So let's go ahead and send them a message. We can see how well we do. All right, now this is a best of it's a best of 3 tournament, but for the first 2 rounds, me and my opponent will be going selecting 2 factions and banning nothing. So I personally quite enjoy Vampire Coast and Wood Elves, since I am picking first, and I am, since I am at the top of the bracket. And then my opponent will simply counterpick, and I choose out of the 2 factions to play. Bowmore saying no ponytail, unsubscribe. Yeah, it's different. You can't make a ponytail with this anymore. I miss the long hair, I gotta say. But on the other hand, it's really good for maintaining my hair, just because it was a lot of work before. I also don't have to, like skin too. If I don't have hair constantly rubbing on my face, that helps my complexion too. I don't know if complexion is the right word, but you know the drill. And eventually it did have to go, but maybe one day we will return to the ponytail. Ginger Root is a newer band. Ah, that's cool. But you remember when you have long hair, cut it, you could not stop shaking your head. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Oh my gosh, yeah, I keep doing this, that sort of shake, and it doesn't move the hair because there's no more mass. It's actually crazy. Yeah, it happens all the time, but I'll get used to it once my brain starts realizing that I am actually doing nothing by giving myself whiplash. Your brain must be dead, your grammar is crap. It's fine, we got there in the end. Alright, so it looks like, oh, he's gonna go Wood Elves. Alright, the glorious Wood Elf mirror matchup chosen by Zero. We will see how this actually goes this time around. Generally a matchup that I feel pretty well practiced in. But, possibly we could just screw up entirely. This matchup relies a lot on you being able to actually control your troops well and to not have them run into precarious situations, specifically nets. One of the largest problems that you can run into here. That is going to be a priority not to get hit by, as a single net can kill off thousands of gold if you are not careful. There's also the debate between if you do go for a kite style, which not everyone does, but there is a debate between Deepwood Scouts and Way Watchers. They both have different uses, but generally you can afford more Deepwood Scouts, and the Way Watchers will get a little bit more damage, but in some situations they are a bit vulnerable. Now, for my build today, I sadly cannot indulge, as this is a fairly competitive tournament. I will be leaving the screen blocker up so that you guys... well, so that there's no chance of any possible stream sniping. All right, now, I believe I have my build ready. Let's go ahead and let my opponent to know. And then as soon as he is ready, we may dive on into the match. Reminds you of a fantasy waiter now, in a good way. Like you're talking about me or the character in, or the band member in Ginger Root. A fancy waiter. Oh no, not fantasy. Fancy waiter. Okay, I'll take that as a good sign. I still have, you know, my sweatshirt on, but I do actually have like a proper waiter vest, so I could potentially do that if I wanted to. That's right. 4 players. Killerinu in chat too. One of the participants in said tournament today. I am very excited to see how you will do today. And I'm also very happy that you checked in, because if you didn't, there would only be 3 people playing. A little bit anticlimactic, I would say, for this tournament. But overall, I think we still would have gone by decently well. The gold tournament, meanwhile, has been doing pretty well for itself right now. I think it has like, what, 12 people watching, which is pretty nice. Ooh, oh man. The one where you leave the big tip too. That's, oh my gosh, that is enticing. Do not tease me so, Adrian. Yeah, I know, right? I know. I was hesitant to say that out loud, but you know, Turin has had much worse things on his stream before, especially with some donation insinuation, so I'm sure it'll be fine. Now, on to the actual gameplay that you guys have come in to view today. I am going to be starting off with a dreaded mirror matchup. I personally am not actually that bothered by mirror matchups, as especially nowadays, the factions in Warhammer are a lot more developed than they used to be. The variety is a lot wider, which means that there's a lot more opportunities to play differently than your opponent in a mirror. Even, you know, the dwarf mirror matchup, and a lot of the times the meta isn't fully defined in the mirror matchup yet, which obviously increases the possibilities even more. So there's a lot of experimentation going down. But overall, even if you do have similar builds / playstyles, the sort of the back and forth that can go on can still be quite interesting. So I'm pretty excited. I hope you guys are too. And in just a second, as soon as my opponent is ready, we will be starting. The best mirror match is still vampire accounts, of course. Ah, yes, the dreaded infinite battle of regenerating undead. Glorious and so boring. That's the one mirror matchup that I actually am not much of a fan of, but here we go. Our opponent is ready. We both decided to deploy back, as sort of a safety maneuver to make sure that there's no insane sniping that goes down. It cannot appear to find his lord, but so far it looks like he's gone for more of an infantry heavy build. I have gone for a bit of a kite playstyle, which is gonna make me feel a little bit more comfortable here, as generally kiting is going to be a little bit better. There's an ancient tree man, and one thing that I do have to worry about here are the Waystalkers. I almost said dreaded there, but I did refrain. But yeah, Waystalkers. Now the reason Waystalkers, and I forgot to turn off fire at will, the reason Waystalkers are sort of bad is that they can get pretty constant damage on me. And I think that is a shot from them coming in right there. Ooh, it seems like there are actually some Deepwood Scouts too. That is going to be a little bit rough, as they do get a pretty nasty volley on my guys. But I will be able to return fire and hopefully punish this unit of Deepwood Scouts. And there we go, a pretty nice volley. We'll be healing these guys to pick them up just a tiny bit, and then hopefully maneuvering about so that these Deepwood Scouts don't get too much damage in. Now, right as the net disappears, my second volley will be landing, and so far it's a decent trade, I would say. Meanwhile, my range units are doing okay. They do have to worry a little bit. My Lord has taken a bit of damage too, so she actually needs to start grouping up with my forces so that when I heal my infantry, my Lord will also be okay. Meanwhile, Deepwood Scouts, I vastly outnumber the ranged pressure that my opponent has here. So I can actually take some pretty nice liberties just standing and trading shots. There we go, I do have the heal back off cooldown. A caster is getting a bit sniped though, so definitely something to worry about here. The infantry for my opponent, that is now beginning to progress, and I'm actually thinking I can move in a little bit more aggressively now. The reason being is that a lot of my opponent's forces here don't have a lot of cavalry support, which means that I can more or less overwhelm them and then instead use my archers to take out the vast quantities of infantry at my opponent's disposal. Now my caster, she did get sniped out, unfortunately. That's going to be a little bit rough, but my own cavalry does move on in, and I will be able to start collapsing in on my opponent's backline. I'll have to be a little bit careful with my Lord though, as I definitely do not want her to be going down. Dodging as much as I can, trying to distract the archers, and if my caster can come back, then that should be pretty nice for me. Now the Sylvan Knights, they have a lot of resistance to units that don't do magic damage, and in this case, most of the Dryads are caught up in a separate fight. Meanwhile, my caster, she is getting sniped out. She gets hit, by an Arrows of Kurnos, that does a lot of damage there. And I think my caster's actually gone. So this is going to be a little bit of a misplay on my part. I definitely did not want to be losing her, and that means that my Lord is actually now without healing, which is a very scary situation to be in. I do still have the cavalry advantage though, and I will be able to net down this tree man to stop him from causing too many issues, as my Lord is going to be landing down. Her goal is to snipe out these Waystalkers, since they will be able to basically finish her off if I am not too careful. Some of these archers are back online too, and I think just those misplays might be my doom here. Losing my caster specifically, and not getting as much damage as I would have hoped with my cavalry. Let's go ahead and continue to snipe out the Waystalkers though. My Deepwood Scouts are still fairly good on ammunition, and if I can finish off these Waystalkers, there may be a chance yet, but the tree man does throw down his heal. It's going to be bringing up one of the Waystalkers back pretty high in HP. Meanwhile, my cavalry is actually fairly beat up at this point, having taken such a big engagement against infantry for such a long time. But it has shut down the ranged power of my opponent, and I'm hoping that that will be able to help me out. There's a little bit of a problem though, that the tree man is going to be actually a little bit it's going to be a little bit hard to take out, especially since I am lacking on the armor piercing damage quite drastically. The Sylvan Knights are really low on HP too, and I think my Lord is about to lose to this Deepwood Scout, which would definitely be very unfortunate. I do still have a few units of Wild Riders left. The Sylvan Knights might be able to stick around too, but with my Lord routing, it seems like this game will go in the favor of my opponent. I will still just sort of play out the rest of the battle though, since cavalry can sometimes get in a lot more value than you might expect. With a lot of cycle charging, that is. One of the Deepwood Scouts, even though he did get healed, he is still running. So no, not Deepwood Scouts, what is this? Waystalkers. Yeah, even though the Waystalker, he is healed up, I can chase him down with my Deepwood Scouts without losing too much ammunition. Alright, so let's take stock of the situation. I'm nearly out of ammunition. I believe there are too many spears to finish off at this point, so I will call it GG and end the game there. Whoops, that's the wrong button. I'm hitting F10 because I played a bit of StarCraft recently, but there we go. My opponent does manage to take the first win. That is a big oof indeed, as I really want to be doing better in this matchup that I had practiced so much for, but in the end, I think the biggest misplay here, getting the Sylvan Knights caught up, definitely was a huge loss for me, and I could have traded a lot better with my Deepwood Scouts early on. They really could have just been getting in a lot more volleys, but I think overall I was just a bit too hasty with my engagement. Nevertheless, lessons learned, and we will move on to the second match, which will be on the Chill Flow. Yeah, StarCraft. Oh my gosh. I was playing the reversed campaigns recently, which was pretty fun. I gotta say, it was very enjoyable indeed. You're very excited to play the early Warhammer 3 PvP? I am too, man. It's the undefined metas are great. Oh, for sure. Actually, the undefined meta of Warhammer is one of the main reasons why I decided to really dive into the multiplayer scene for it, because it really felt like I could develop my own strategies in this game. Ah, Zero hasn't played the Wood Elf Mirror before? Darn it, that's rough. That's rough. I've played it a load of times and I still lost. Alright, well, we'll have to come back in the next 2 games. Alright, here we go. And what's it gonna be? It's gonna be Beastmen and High Elves. Now, instinct tells me that Chaos, probably a good idea. Especially against Beastmen. Lizardmen, also a wonderful choice. So I'll be looking into that. The games where you play as the enemy defending. Those are clever. Like, which games? Let's see, Beastmen and High Elves. Could go Bretonia. You know what? I'll try out some Bretonia. Let's go Bretonia. Alright. Now, I would expect him to go Beastmen here, which is pretty standard. And there we go. He does indeed go for them. So let's see how well I can play this matchup. We are ready. I do have a preset build here, so I'm cautiously optimistic that I'll do well. Yeah, mirrors can be a little bit volatile. I think in that case, though, I just played it incorrectly. Way too aggressively with my cavalry. And not using my skirmishing tools as well as I could have. Basically taking insane damage on my caster. Oh, excuse me, one I shouldn't have. For the lady, indeed. Someone saying go Chaos. Chaos was very tempting. But I wanted to practice this matchup a bit more. You realize it's probably futile hope, but High Elves would be nice to see. Yeah, unfortunately, I sort of hard countered them there. In most situations, my opponent would be going Beastmen. He would only be playing High Elves in the most favored of matchups for them. So it would be pretty hard to go up against them without getting hard countered. Alright, nice. Let's go ahead and queue up. By the way, while we're waiting here, my good old friend Human Boy, I think, is still streaming the Gold League tournament. So if you are interested in checking him out, he does do a lot of Warhammer casting content, which you might be interested in. Against Beastmen as the Bretonias. Really don't like playing this as the Bretonias. Bretonians. For this matchup, I think it can be a little bit sketchy for sure. But I don't think it's unwinnable by any means. And it is one that I have practiced a little bit. One very important thing that you want to be careful of, though, is to not get hit by those nasty Traderkins. I did make a video on it recently, and cavalry, they get annihilated by it. even your cheapest cavalry still don't want to get hit by Traderkin. This build though is pretty fun. I would recommend you guys try copying it. It is fairly well optimized, I would say, where you do have a pretty chunky front line that will hold for you for a decent amount of time. And yeah, you have a decent front line that'll actually push back the usual chaff that the beastmen send towards you. This frees up your knights quite a bit. And then I'll be using my archers to shoot down any monsters. So for my opponent, it looks like he has Taurox, very standard, with a good few of his abilities gone for the Manticores too. There are actually some Koroks Man-Rippers, very elite infantry for the beastmen, and primary target that I want to be focusing down here. So with my mounted yeomen, I do have the skirmishing advantage, so I can actually delay the engagement a bit. And one way to do that is simply by rotating your army, as that will make it pretty hard for the infantry on the far flanks to actually catch up. Now the yeomen are just going to be continuing to loose their ammunition away. My archers are going to focus down one of these Ungor spearmen. We will turn on, oh whoopsie daisies. We will turn on guard mode to make sure that they do a little bit better there. I don't want them running off ahead of themselves now. And then, yeah, we'll just see how well this focus fire does. So, pretty decent damage there on the first volley. But it looks like some Gore Herd are moving in, so I do want to get my knights into support. And I'm going to focus down the Koroks Man-Rippers, as they are a very elite unit. I'm denying engagements on many areas for my opponent too, since I want to make sure that my troops are only getting the best fights that they could possibly be finding. Let's go ahead and throw down Dwellers below here too, to really support this infantry engagement. And while a Traderkin will be hitting a few of my skirmishers, in the end, they are just skirmishers, so that's not too much of a huge loss. Now, preemptively throwing down the heal to make sure the paladins will be staying safe here. Definitely going to be pretty important. And for my knights, I want to make sure that I'm cycle charging with them as much as possible. It looks like there is a fairly nice engagement there on the chaos spawn that I can take, and my archers have been going mostly uncontested for a decent amount of time. A pretty scary spell does drop though. Going to be knocking over a few of the archers. Some of the dogs do manage to push through also. And Taurox looks like he's getting a bit ahead of himself. Now, I do have to be pretty careful in this situation. As Taurox, he can proc a lot of his buffs. And there we go. He does use one of his defensive abilities, which means I have to go ahead and disengage. Now, I do have the luxury to do this since my cavalry is nearby. And they'll be able to pretty easily stop Taurox from, you know, running down my troops. As soon as the Fey Enchantress and the Paladins have escaped, I can run away with said cavalry. And then I'm in a pretty good position. Centaurs do charge in. They get a good amount of damage here on my forces as they sort of push through, but I get a nice charge in on them with my cavalry. They will be running down a few archers though, but as long as they don't take too much damage, they will be coming back. And now that Taurox's buff has worn off, I can actually decide to go in for an engagement onto him. Now, Traderkin is still on the battlefield, so I don't want to be engaging too heavily here. And instead, I'm just going to be using my knights defensively, since that will usually spread them out a little bit better. Peasants are just on delaying duty, and the paladins are finding large targets to hit, as that is where they'll be the most efficient. Koroks Man-Rippers are back, but my paladins are still healthy. And now I'm going to focus down this second Manticore. The reason I am going for the second Manticore is because it is a pretty high damage unit that doesn't have a lot of HP. So by finishing it off, well, by targeting it, it's actually going to go down fairly quickly. And then I don't have to worry about taking nearly as much damage. You can see that right now most of my play has been avoidance here. Avoiding, you know, sort of trying not to group up, avoiding Taurox and so on. And that's because during a longer pitched battle, Bretonia will fare much better than the Beastmen because of their regeneration. Now, a couple dogs will be coming back in. They're going to be hitting my archers, but my mounted yeomen actually will be able to trade fairly effectively against them. And overall, Taurox, he just can't be in so many places at the same time. So I'm just hitting everywhere that he isn't and slowly getting damage that way. Now this Manticore, I really want to chase it off. It seems like a little bit of a miss micro there. My opponent does actually move in with his Centaurs and doesn't intercept my Yeomen, and that's going to let me get a little bit of damage. Meanwhile, Torox, he's at half HP, which means that I'm going to be feeling a little bit more comfortable taking an engagement against them in the late game. And meanwhile, my mounted Yeomen, it looks like they are beginning to run out of ammunition, so that means I'm going to turn off fire at will to make sure that they don't waste too much of the ammo in the late game, since I now have the micro to properly use that ammunition more effectively. In the meantime, these Yeomen are going to be chasing down that Manticore as well as they can, and my remaining archers are going to be forcing the Beastmen to take an engagement. I do have a few units here too that would very much appreciate a heal, so let's go ahead and group them up onto this unit of Ungors here, and then see if Torox decides to take an engagement. I think he doesn't want to be fighting my knights just yet, so it looks like he's deciding to more or less hang back right now. And I'm keeping the ammunition on this unit of Yeomen specifically because they have that wonderful poison effect that none of my units have at the moment. So with that poison, I could really give Torox some issues here, since it will be reducing his overall damage by quite a bit. So I'm actually going to be pretty happy taking this engagement here. My two paladins do manage to get a pretty nice dive in on top of him, and with my knights nearby, I'm feeling pretty safe here, especially with the big heal that I'll be able to drop. And Torox taking quite a bit of damage. I think I have this match in the bag. Let's go ahead and send in more Yeomen, turn on fire at will, just so that they can get a little bit more damage on the approach. And if Torox is looking pretty scary, I can always cycle charge him. One thing is that the Enchantress has to be a little bit careful getting in too long of a fight against him, as Torox can tear her face off pretty quickly if you're not careful. But the two paladins are fighting on top of him now. Balance of power is pretty well in my favor, and if you look at his HP, he should be going down pretty soon. I'll throw down another heal too, to heal up the paladins specifically. They are one of the most important tools here for my army. And my Bretonnian archers out of ammunition, definitely a very good sign for them, since it means that, they managed to get in as much damage as they possibly could this game. And the Beastmen do hit army losses, and I will be taking the second game in a supposedly bad matchup, but one that I've practiced quite a bit, so I was pretty comfortable playing. My cavalry traded decently against the Beastmen large units, and I think the focus fire of these peasants really helped a lot. You can see they basically all paid for themselves, and then the paladins from there finished off Torox in the late game. So pretty good. GG. Hey, Adobe. Nice to see ya. Thank you. Yeah, I'm pretty happy to finally have short hair again. Now, let's see, what's the map? It's gonna be Languy. I'm gonna set up the pick 3 and then I'll catch up with the rest of chat. Now, on my Discord, I did, oh my gosh, Adobe, I think you're my first member ever. Welcome. Oh my gosh, yeah, we have our first deckhand. That's amazing. I think you get like emotes, so feel free to spam all of your Luther Harkin emotes in here. But yeah, that's absolutely wonderful. Okay. Oh, GG. I'll get my 3. So, part of the pick 3 faction picker, I can actually enter in the factions that I've played, and then I'll make sure to account for that in my pick 3 matchup. So I played Bretonnia, and I played Wood Elves. My opponent has played Beastmen, and they played Wood Elves. And then I'll pick 3 from here. New haircut means plus 15 speed for the lower resistance. Yeah, seems pretty good. Oh, whoops. This is my pick 2 bot. Whoopsie daisies, I have to run the code again. Let's see here. I played Bretonnia, I played Wood Elves, he played Beastmen and Wood Elves. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Late game fatigue on Torox means his armor is much worse. Oh yes, actually, that helps me out immensely. Just it's huge actually. Yeah, you can't discount fatigue. It is a hidden mechanic, but the debuffs that it actually gives you are insane. Absolutely insane. Now, it's telling me Beastmen, Vampire Coasts, and Dwarves, and I'll ban the Dark Elves. So there we go. I have given my opponent the 3 factions that I'll be playing, and we'll see if there's a hole in them. If there is, I guess my bot isn't working correctly. But yeah, there are 2 tiers of membership. On the higher tier, which is more expensive, so don't get it if you don't need it. But I do offer sort of like replay reviews, one-on-one, very in-depth analysis for anyone that's interested. But if you're just looking to support, honestly, any amount of support is greatly appreciated. So thank you. Let's see what else. This army looks like it would struggle to kill the big bull. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I guess in the end it did work out. You really have to keep the paladins and the Fey Enchantress alive, though. If you don't, it is absolutely terrible. Oh yeah. This pick 3, it relies on the idea that beastmen can beat the vampire counts. So let's go ahead and see if that's possible. Let's see if it is actually possible. My theory before is that I'm pretty sure I can do pretty good here, but I haven't played it against a sufficiently strong Vampire Counts player. So if I'm wrong, this is where I'll be learning it. Ready! So we'll see how this goes. Every time you hear Luther's name, his voice line screaming plays in your head. Oh, yeah. Luther Harkin. Oh my gosh. The voice lines in this game are insane. I can't even possibly come close to emulating it with my own voice, but the energy is just, it's something to behold for sure. Yeah, I need to run Luther a little bit more often. It's been a really long time since I really considered running the man, just because Noctilus has really taken the limelight as of late. It's not that Luther really got nerfed exactly. I feel like it's just the meta has sort of moved on from him. A lot of people are taking much stronger single entity squads against the forces of the Beastmen, and because of that, because of their strong single entity squads, Luther just does not fare as well. The likes of Deathmaster Snickich will catch him and tear him apart. There are I don't know, even the High Elves can sometimes. The High Elves nowadays, they just take way too many archers, which make them not very good either. And sort of just because it is a very heavy archer meta for Vampire Coast, Noctilus just does way better. His anti-cavalry too helps a lot also. And now that I've been mixing in Sirens into my builds pretty often, the terror is much more easily spread out across my army. You recently learned that Vargulfs plus Crypt Horrors actually beat the Gorgon with cart support. Yeah, it's pretty brutal. Gotta be pretty careful here as a Beastman. I'm wondering if Zero has the build though, because you sort of need the build and the playstyle to make it work correctly. Luther means no double gunnery white. Yes, that's true too. I forgot about that. Yeah, double gunnery white was a recently discovered thing that they are actually broken. Broken is a bit extreme, some might disagree, but they are one of the strongest units in the Vampire Coast roster. When someone comes to me nowadays and asks how to play Coast, I tell them to take Noctilus and 2 gunnery whites, because simply they are just that good. So since they sort of outclass Luther nowadays in range damage and in melee and in cost, since they cost the same, yeah, just not something Not something that you can really pass out on, since Coast did get nerfed. Larry plus double Phoenix. Yeah, they can do pretty well against Luther too. I've seen that build a couple times. Oh yes, Aranessa. I was theory crafting a bit. And I feel like Aranessa might actually be pretty good against the vampire accounts. Now, don't get me wrong, she's still pretty terrible in general, but think about it. She has a net, and what do you do with nets? You pin down the single entities and pounce on them with like your Leviathans or something, and your Gunnery Whites. Kill them off, win the game. Easy peasy, because without single entities cycle charging, the vampire counts do have a hard time killing the crabs. So I feel like maybe there's some sort of insane potential there. But if they bring Spirit Leech, you lose immediately. So who knows? Who knows? Scab's Wrath is broken, indeed. I think most of us can agree with that. Is it how they can just use their missiles? Yes, yeah. The fact that they can shoot in melee, much like Luther Harkin before them, that helps out a ton. It gives them more melee DPS than anything else in the game. Plus, they have the extra damage boost from a whole bunch of other stuff. So, yeah. Yeah, that helps them out quite a bit. Let's see. How do I want to do this build? I think this more or less works. I'm just going to be in the forest at the start. We'll go ahead and advance. Hopefully, pounce on my opponent rather quickly. And the goal here is to get 2 casts of Traderkin on the Crypt Horrors. If I can do that, the damage that is dealt is absolutely insane. So that's sort of the hope. It's that, yeah, that's the hope. Because with so much mass, the Gorgons will have a really hard time. And yeah, it really depends on that. It really depends on that. Now, for my opponent, deploying on the far side of the map, we are seeing some Crypt Horrors, indeed. Helman Gorst, very standard. We got some zombies. And some Varix Reavers. Okay, regenerating cavalry unit. Now, at the start of the battle, one thing that I want to do is simply position my heroes, my lord, behind the Gorgons. This is a counterplay to the Gaze of Nagash spam that you will be seeing, since it does get a lot of damage on your heroes. You definitely do not want that to be happening. And another thing I can be doing is moving up with my Centaurs and being extremely annoying to the Crypt Horrors. Essentially, I'll just move right on in and then just start throwing some axes their way. I got my chariots too. They're going to be plowing through the infantry, no problem. There is a single Banshee here, but I have my good old Jabberslite that will be able to get a lot of damage too. So, while my skirmishers get underway, I guess we just sit back, relax, and do nothing for a while, because I don't really need to take a big infantry engagement just yet. I can be a little bit slower on that. The chariots will force the Crypt Horrors to move up, and then the Centaur throwing axes will get their damage in. It's a pretty nice combo that you can do. And then just with a little bit of bouncing around, I will be feeling pretty good. Now, I don't want Gorst to get too much damage here, as he will be able to actually trade quite scarily against my forces here, using a lot of that spam of the what's it, Gaze of Nagash. Yeah, that's definitely very scary, so I have to be a little bit careful. Now, I'm going to deny the left flank here of my opponents a little bit, as I very much do not want to be taking a big old engagement there just yet. And instead, I'm just going to be engaging with 1 unit of infantry at a time. Meanwhile, the Gorgons, very, very nice melee damage. They'll be fighting that Vargeist, and I can just begin getting a few trades in. Now, the Gorgon doesn't want to get too ahead of itself, and the chariots are mostly going to be playing a dodging game with the rest of the forces here. For Taurox, he has to be a little bit careful, but not too much, and I'm just waiting for my opponent to get more engaged here. You can get a lot of value with Traderkin if you simply have a little bit of patience. Now, the Jabberslite did get a little bit ahead of itself, and it did dive in a bit too far forwards, but that does cause my opponent to actually over-engage there, and I will be getting a really nice initial Traderkin. That's going to be helping me out a lot. but I still have to be careful that I don't overextend with my forces here. And the primary goal is to get my guys disengaged as quickly as I can. I want to get another Traderkin as soon as possible, so I will be procking that big ol' mana, Winds of Magic boost on my caster, and hopefully I'll be able to get enough Winds of Magic for another Traderkin. I will have to be a tiny bit careful though, as the Jabber Scythe is actually taking a lot more damage than I would have hoped. And that means that the Banshee is going to be pretty vicious against me. It does indeed rout. One of the Gorgons having a pretty rough time too. The other one sitting in combat, not too afraid of the general situation. And Torox, he's going to be looking in for a bit of a better engagement now. Now, I will have another Traderkin, and I can throw that down to just overcast hit everything in the entire army of my opponent. That's going to be helping me out quite a bit. The other Jabber Scythe still has to find a better disengage though. And in the meantime, Torox is looking for some targets. Now, Gorst, he's a really juicy target. If I can get him down, that would be absolutely amazing. Meanwhile, the Jabber Scythe is back, so he's going to be finishing off the Banshee, since she is pretty scary. She's an ethereal unit that can avoid my forces for quite some time. As being ethereal, she is just very tanky. And having the Jabber Scythe to finish her off is going to be quite important here. Killing off the infantry too will be really good too. And in the meantime, it looks like right now my Gorgons are having a bit of a hard time. They do have regeneration, so I'm not too worried about them, and they will be able to get quite a few disengages here. In the meantime, I'm slowly regenerating my Winds of Magic, and I'm looking for better engagements here. This backside is really bad for a lot of my big monsters, so instead I'm going to be focusing on the frontline fight and seeing if I can do better there. Especially with the Jabber Scythe using its Mortis engine on everything, that's definitely going to be helping me out a lot. So I'm just going to disengage with Torox and the Behemoth here, and then bring in the Centaurs to give some throwing axe support. Meanwhile, the Jabber Scythe is going to be hunting down that Banshee, as she is very annoying, chasing down my casters for the entire game. And then we'll be getting in ready for another Traderkin on this blob if possible. Let's see here, where's that Jabber Scythe? A little bit too deep in combat, I feel. I'm going to pull him into a bit of a safer position and get him out of there. There we go. Alright, now the two Gorgons are going to try to charge into the Vargulf. The reason is because it is a little bit exposed. I do have to be a tiny bit careful with the Gorgon though, but with my infantry support, I think that should be able to help me out. Torox needs to get a little bit engaged too, but right now the battle, despite getting some really good casts there of my Winds of Magic, my opponent has definitely been taking better engagements with his single entities. I think I overextended with mine just a little bit, and if the Jabber Scythe goes down, that will likely be it for this game. Let's go ahead and throw down the third Traderkin though. That should be able to get a lot of value. Meanwhile, Gorgons trying to pass through to get in on top of these Vargulfs. They did finally overextend, which is something I should be able to capitalize on. The Traderkin looks like it should be helping me out quite a bit too. And we'll see if they're able to make it. The Crit Horrors are definitely going to be a little bit of a problem here. And one of the Gorgons seems like it will be routing off. Torox getting a bit gooned out here too. But I might be able to pick off one of these Vargulfs. It's definitely going to be a little bit of a close match here, but overall I think my opponent will be winning this match. With that overextension of my Gorgons, I don't think there's really much I could do. You got to be really careful with your single entities here, and as you can see, not trading out too well will be costing me the game. Now this is the ace match, so I might as well play it out. See if I can get in a little bit more value here, but usually the balance of power pretty well reflects the situation in the game. I did manage to get some really nice Traderkins this game though, but it looks like it just was not enough. There was still a lot of infantry left for my opponent, and I really wish I had been more careful with my Jabber Scythes. Still though, I feel like I was on the right path. I just needed to be a little bit more careful with my control, so GG, well played. My opponent will be progressing on to the finals. I will not be winning my own tournament this time around, but we will be seeing hopefully some pretty fun matches. So there we go. The match is complete. A pretty standard build from my opponent. I think I got really good value on my caster. But I'm pretty sure if we take a look at the Jabber Scythe, yeah, he did not do nearly as well. All my single entities were really caught up in the back of the Vampire Count's formation for a really long time. And one thing I was surprised about was how tanky the Banshee was. Despite getting hit by the Jabber Scythe pretty often, sort of just stuck around for the entire battle. So definitely something to take a look at. And I'll probably edit my how I think about that matchup. Yeah, so if I am Beastman and he's playing Vampire Counts, probably a matchup I'll want to avoid in the future. And there we go. So now we will be moving on to the other semifinals now. Let's go ahead and update the bracket. There we go. You can see it over there. And we will now be casting the match between Hadries and Killer Inu. All right, Killer Inu, you guys are up. Well, okay. Well, first we'll see if they actually have a lobby hosted up right now. Let's see, what do we got? Ah, there we go. It is hosted. Wonderful. So let's go ahead and join that and see how this goes. Now, I am sort of melting here in my sweater, despite it being pretty cold in Canada. When I close my door, this room gets really hot. It turns out running Warhammer it provides heat at the same time. So there you go. Hey, all right. And it seems like both players are hovering Beastmen, so we'll see what they decide to go for. Yeah, Vampire Counts have this match figured out. Yeah, that one was pretty rough. I feel like I could have controlled my single entities better, but such is the way. Hey, Zyphos. Short hair suits me well. Thank you. Thank you. This is basically my lifetime hairstyle. I've been doing comb overs for ever since I started deciding what type of haircut I would be getting. More skirmishers, perhaps. I think actually like a quad Centaur type of playstyle could actually be really good against the Vampire Counts. But something to experiment with. You could go for like a mass ranged type of playstyle too. I don't know how well that works against certain builds, but it's something I want to explore a little bit more. You think the regen would cancel the skirmishers out? Probably. You have to focus fire units pretty hard, but Vampire Counts, they can pretty easily screen off with their infantry, just because of how cheap they are. Let's see, you're wondering about the Jabber Scythe damage too? Yeah, it only got 1,000. The caster got 3,000 though. He got basically as much damage as he possibly could have gone that game. But man, I wish I had controlled my single entities better. They really got lured into the Vampire Count's backline, and that is something you do not want to be doing. Torox and the double Gorble, also an option. That one's pretty good too. Although you need a caster, so you do have to be a little bit careful there. I question the play a little. Yeah. He did real good. Real good. It was my single entities that let me down. I wasn't even getting hit by the gazes of Nagashes either. But yeah, oh hey, Zero in chat. I just played against you. Happy to have you here. Hope everything is going well. It looks like we got High Elves and Dark Elves for Killer Inu. Hey, Tequila Sunset. Happy to see you. Now, High Elves and Dark Elves. It looks like Hadries taking the bait. The obvious counterpick to Elves, all Elves in fact, is Bretonia. They are absolutely amazing. And, well, you know, against Elves. And it looks like Killer Inu does go for the Dark Elves, the more armor-piercing variant of the Elves, with a bit less range. But if you're getting mobbed down by 1,000,000 units of cavalry, well, range is not as much of an important thing. So overall, I think that's a pretty good choice. Adobe, hello? Well, you know, you're waving to everyone else, but man, you stand out a lot with that green name now. I will see every message you put in chat. Insane. Alright. You don't like cone heads. Alright. Slicker. Putting in the random opinions. Are you calling me a conehead or what is this? Are you looking for a fight? Well, we know Killerino and Hadries are. Now, personally, I'm pretty sure Dark Elves are quite behind in this matchup. There were a couple of revolutions for the Dark Elves here. You don't like the elf hats? Hey, there we go. That's the type of anti-factionism we enjoy here. And no further than that, otherwise I'll actually get banned. But yeah, Dark Elves, they have a pretty hard time versus Bretonnians. The idea is that Bretonia outclasses their cavalry on absolutely every front, and then after that they can just run over all the infantry. But Dark Elves, they can hit the trebuchets with fireballs. They also have bolt throwers, really good for punishing archers, trebuchets, and cavalry sometimes. They got Scourge Runner chariots, bolt throwers on wheels. Really nice option against Bretonia that has to be countered by the single entities. Now still, even with all these benefits against cavalry, Dark Elves will still have a pretty hard time. Bretonians can unman their artillery if they wish. They have many different options to sort of avoid, well, they have many options to avoid the damage that comes out of Scourge Runner chariots too. And then as long as they can manage all of that, they'll have stronger single entities and stronger cavalry. A really nice position to be in, but I think you are only a few misplays away from losing as the Bretonians here. Clearly the Dark Elves need to bring the big gun, Malice Darkblade. Ah yes, one of the most exciting lords that is never used ever. Never. Poor Malice. Poor guy. Yeah, I do like him, but yeah, they did buff him up recently. It's just sort of he doesn't have the same impact that a caster does. When you have caster lords that are also good in melee, it's really hard to pass up, which is why you see Marathi and Malekith so often. Everywhere. So, yeah. The trebuchets basically outtrade everything else that can shoot back. So, trebuchets, there are different ways to negate their value. You can dodge to avoid them. And overall, they have a pretty low DPS. So there actually are a few rush Dark Elf builds that will beat builds that have too many trebuchets. And we'll see what these players decide to go for. Yeah. Yes. Good old Malice. He sort of has a pseudo Soul Stealer. He sort of has an extra HP bar. But, you know, that's about it. That's about it. He costs as much as a lot of the more expensive lords. He doesn't have as many good bound abilities like Malekith. And you have to spend extra money to take a caster just to run Malice Darkblade. A rough time for him indeed. If they gave him Soul Stealer, I bet he would be meta though. Compared to Malekith, and now that he doesn't take too much damage from himself. Legit question, how much do you think Warhammer 3 will change the air game? Well, it really depends on the rules and the limits. How many air units you're allowed to take has an insane impact on the air game. Because think about ranged air cheese, and I forgot to change the player names. Wow, that is embarrassing. All right, who do we got? Killer Inu, there we go, at 0 games, nice. And then Hadries at 0, there we go. Yeah, the air game is really weird. If you want to have air dominance and a range unit, you lose how many melee units you can take in the air, which means that anyone that goes full melee will have an advantage. Overall, the ground units will do much better against flying units too, simply because they don't have as much mobility, so they save a bit of money there. And then what happens because of that? Wow, that's an interesting Bretonian build. What happens because of that is that oh god, my thoughts, they're all gone. Is that the person that can take range units doesn't go air. And then the person that has melee air units doesn't go for air either, because it's more efficient to stay on the ground. So it sort of just gets nullified unless you can really go all in on it. And I think that's sort of what's going to happen with Cathay and so on. Like, those lanterns do not help at all in the air battle, or at least as far as I know. So I don't think they'll really help the Cathay air fight too much, unless their flying units are absolutely amazing, which I would doubt based on how squishy they usually are. Now, for this matchup, we have the Dark Elves against the Bretonians. Generally, a bad matchup for the Dark Elves, but Killerinu leaving it open for Hadri's counterpick. He's bought 2 Manticores, Marathi, coming in with these spells and abilities. It's the usual kit. Cold One Knights, and actually triple Cold One Dread Knights. 5 spears. And that's going to be it. A pretty nice build. We're going to see if his cavalry force pays off, because Hadri's this time going for a pretty small cavalry force. He has 2 units of Grail, 1 Grail Guardian, and 1 Questing Knight, actually. Enchantress, 2 Paladins, and a whole lot of ground units. Men-at-Arms, like crazy, and a couple Peasant Archers with Halberd support. Single Trebuchet too. Gonna be really nice since it doesn't have any hard counters here. And what does this mean for Hadri's? Let's take a look. Let's take a quick look at what this means for Hadri's. In general, the Dark Elf army, they have pretty good infantry, and they can rely on that to push into the Bretonian backline. But if you look at Hadri's army, he has spent a lot more on his infantry force than simple Dread Spears. These Battle Pilgrims will tear them apart. Taking a look at the stats, they have 38 melee attack, 33 weapon strength, 44 damage. The Spears, on the other hand, are 26, 42, 25. Much less than the sort of Battle Pilgrims here. And they're going to be winning that fight, which means that Hadri's has to be pushing through with his other units. And what units will that be? That's going to be his cavalry, Dread Knights. Very scary. But are they just going to get bogged down in the halberds? It really depends on how well Hadri's manages to control his army in this game. Hey, Doom Massage saying, looking sharp. Thank you, man. Thank you. It feels lighter. It feels lighter for sure. Now, as the battle gets underway, a lot of people are skipping to this timestamp specifically. We'll have to get over my haircut, get over my own personal looks for once, and actually go into some analysis. Trebuchets are going to be getting a few shots in, and they will be forcing the Dark Elves to make a play. If this was CSGO, the Dark Elves would be the terrorists, and the Bretonians would be the counter-terrorists. Pretty sort of in that sort of game theory analysis side of things. So the Dark Elves have to get some sort of advantage here. They do have a lot of mobility elements that they can use to... Man, what a terrible analogy. Does my audience even play CSGO anyways? So the Dark Elves are trying to make a play. And the main problem is they can't make a play with their infantry, which they usually count on. So the cavalry, they're going to be trying to support their infantry, and then Hadri's is going to be trying to counter that army-wide support. Of course, the single entity squad can be rather scary too. 2 Manticores can be quite brutal in a short fight, but if Hadri's does play it out correctly, a long extended fight would mean that the Paladins would be able to win it out. Batten saying you had 3k hours in CS. All right, well, never mind. CSGO references for the rest of the day then. Emo terrorists, perhaps, but anyways, there's not a lot of trading going on right now. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna chill and read chat for a bit. Now the archers are gonna be firing away. They don't really do much against the infantry here. They mostly want to be firing at the cavalry and warding them back. So far, it seems like they're doing a pretty good job at that, since the cavalry is very far away, and the Battle Pilgrims are getting underway in the mainline fight. They know they can win this engagement, and it's forcing the play from Killerinu. He's diving on in to potentially look for a fight, but landing, that's a death sentence because of the Peasant Archers. So he's more or less airlocked here in this beginning stage of the battle. Meanwhile, Men-at-Arms holding back the Dread Spears, since Dread Spears don't do very much damage. In fact, the Men-at-Arms doing surprisingly well against Dread Spears. Who would have guessed it? Bretonnian peasants stronger than the noble Dark Elves. But one pretty big loss for Hadri's at the start. His Questing Knights getting out-traded by the Scourge Runner Chariots, but potentially a very large play here. One of the Manticores getting rampaged. Potentially, maybe even a good rampage, as it does rout off and create a gap in the lines for the Dark Elves to sweep in and take a few peasants out. It looks like these Cold One Knights will be moving on in, and the single entity fight is on. But much more important than this Manticore getting picked off, Morathi getting full surrounded by Grail Guardians, one of the tankiest, heaviest units of cavalry in the game, but she just barely manages to escape. She throws down a Soul Stealer, gets some really nice damage too, but over here, the Cold One Knights getting countercharged by the cavalry. Like I said, all this infantry support, it's going to be helping out the Bretonnians a lot at bogging down cavalry. Meanwhile, over here, Dwellers Below hitting up those Dread Knights too. They're in a pretty rough shape in general. Grail Guardians extremely tanky. They are happy to sit and fight among the cavalry. They'll be able to do that for a really long time. And so far, it seems like they're able to keep the Fey Enchantress safe. Doombolt dropping down too. But the Grail Guardians are sort of spread out. It seems like the Doombolt might not actually hit. Let's go ahead and see right now. The HP, it takes out one model of Grail Guardians. The unlucky knight getting completely obliterated from the sky. He's going to be having a bad day, but the rest of them gonna be pretty nice, basically taking no damage. Meanwhile, Bretonnian infantry keeping away the cavalry on the left flank. And over here, another really nice engagement by the Paladins and the Fey Enchantress. It seems like they've routed off the Manticores one time already, which means now they really just have to deal with Morathi. And despite how strong Morathi is, a 3v1 is not gonna go her way. Now, the Manticore is flying back in. It will be providing terror, and a lot of the Bretonnian peasants are pretty low on HP. Comet dropping from the Fey Enchantress too, missing the cavalry. Both missile spells not going too well for either force here. And the Manticore getting in a pretty nice dive in on the Fey Enchantress. She throws down a heal on top of herself, emergency heal, since things are looking a little bit scary for her. But the Paladins come on in, and they'll be cleaning up that Manticore no problem. The cavalry, however, for the Bretonnians has been whittled down pretty heavily, but taking a quick look at the mini-map here, they have a lot of infantry that are ready to come back into the fight later on. Meanwhile, the Dark Elves, not nearly as much rallying forces. And I'd say it sort of depends on how well the Fey Enchantress does here. The Bretonnians do not fare very well if their lord goes down, but the real target to take her out, it's basically just Morathi, and landing in to kill the Fey Enchantress is just as scary for Morathi as it is for her. Soul Stealer dropping, but don't be too worried about the Fey Enchantress. She does have 40% magic resist on her Unicorn, so she's not actually going to be taking that much damage, though it will be putting her lower than she probably wants to be. Dread Spears taking the Mortis engine effect too, and the Soul Stealer actually getting in a good amount of damage on the Paladins, so that's going to be nice for the Dark Elves. Meanwhile, over here, archers firing away at the cavalry, getting pretty nice damage, but the peasant bowmen are getting run down. It's going to be a pretty big loss for the Bretonnians. And given that we're only at the 6-minute mark here, there are like 2 more Soul Stealers left on the side of the Dark Elves. And that could really change things up here if the Fey Enchantress and Paladins don't heal up. Now, another Doombolt does drop, hits nothing. Basically just a couple Men-at-Arms. A little bit of a lost use there. Doombolt, an amazing ability at sniping out Paladins, gonna be losing quite a bit of value hitting infantry instead, but we'll see if that pays off in the end. Infantry support, very important in this game. And meanwhile, we've seen the Paladins, they are beginning to heal up too. Fey Enchantress also patching herself up a little bit. And side note, dropping Doombolt on a moving single entity generally won't be hitting them too much. Alright. Now, the late game engagements are now underway. Morathi has dived in again, and it seems like it's going to be a big snipe on the Fey Enchantress. She takes one big hit. Will she take another? Manticore misses her at very low HP, and Morathi takes a hit from the Paladin. Fey Enchantress now dangerously low, using Arcane Conduit to try and get a heal up but she actually breaks off. This is really bad for the Bretonians if a Manticore can terror out all of this infantry. But the Manticore is in the sky now, which means that this infantry, despite the loss of the Fey Enchantress, will be holding out decently well. There is a good chance that the Manticore will be coming back though, and if it does, we could be seeing some pretty big swing plays. Meanwhile, Fey Enchantress running for the hills, the long way off the edge of the map. This is going to be a benefit for the Bretonians. Why? Well, it's going to be because while the Fey Enchantress is running off in the distance, well, I guess the Dark Elves are just going to hit army losses. So, wow, that was pretty anticlimactic, but I guess Hadri's won it. I did not see that army losses coming, but it makes sense, as most of the Dark Elf forces were off the battlefield, and Marathi, despite the fact that she had a lot of potential healing, in the end she wasn't able to get it off. So the value on the paladins and all the infantry really hard carried there. And taking a look at the paladins, mind you, turns out a very good unit. 2,500 gold value on one of them. Battle Pilgrims trading out pretty well. And what are these Bretonian infantry doing? Very rarely do you see mass Bretonian infantry builds, but it seems like they all traded pretty well. Pretty fun stuff from Hadri's. I really do like the builds that he brings in these tournaments. And I'm excited to see what the next match has in store for us. GG's from both players. Very nice. Very nice game, actually. It was pretty contested all the way up until the end. It was just that final engagement and the fact that the Dark Elves were losing a lot of their infantry by the end of it. At least they saved the op. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I guess they did. Marathi did live. She got out of there. I think both Manticores actually living. A bit of a rarity, as they are such high priority targets. They generally get sniped pretty often, even though they do route off pretty easily. Yeah, seemed closer than the balance of power says. It was mostly because of those soul stealers that could have come up. There were definitely, I think, 2 more in the bag, maybe 1 more at the end of the game. 1 more for sure. But unfortunately for the Dark Elves, they did not have the time to get that cast down. Your later Soul Stealer casts, they come in later the earlier you use them. So you want to be waiting till you build up to 30 Winds of Magic if you want to get all of those casts out pretty quickly. And perhaps Killerinu was doing it a bit earlier than you would have hoped for. When the Bretonians first came to be, it had the strongest infantry in the game, only changed when it got released as a DLC faction. Actually, that is some Bretonian lore of Warhammer 1 that I was unaware of. I came in around Warhammer 2, so I didn't really experience much of 1. But it's exciting to see that apparently they had the best infantry ever. Now, way back, Bretonia had basically no anything. They were like just the thinnest little faction until they actually got a proper DLC. And now look at them. One of the top tier factions that only gets hard countered in a couple situations. Maybe a little bit more than a couple, but who's counting? They were chopping up big lizards with their bills. Insanity. Let's see. Yep. Peasant archers could destroy wood elf archers. Wow. That's pretty great. I like it. Most people came in with Warhammer 2. Warhammer 1 was an absolute mess, was it? That's interesting to hear. For me, the reason I took so long to join Warhammer was because I did not have work. I was but an unemployed university person. So I just could not afford or didn't want to spend the money on Warhammer 2 just yet. I believe it was a Warhammer 1 sale that actually got me in on the overall sort of situation here. Optimus Pine. It's been too long. No wonder all those spells didn't hit. They're called missiles after all. Amazing. 7 out of 10. Warhammer 1 was fun. Good to hear, Zero. It was only what? 1 to 2 years between 1 and 2? Yeah, the gap was pretty large. And the gap between Warhammer 2 and 3 also pretty large. Extended thanks to lockdowns, but yeah, such is the way of things. We shall be patient and wait for wait for it to come out complete and ready to go rather than bugged. All right, now Killerino, he says he's now afraid of what Hadri's will bring as chaos. We saw Hadri's bringing a pretty interesting Bretonnian build last time around to good success. But for chaos, this is gonna go mass infantry again. No skirmishers perhaps? Kolek even. I'm not sure. It's against the Wood Elves, so the potential for experimentation is huge for our player today. Total War 1 was so terrible, so much draw kiting. To be honest, it still happens in quick battles nowadays. But I heard you can find a couple of good games on quick battles. I personally prefer my own ranked ladder, personally, but you know, since I programmed it, but I heard quick battles can sometimes be okay. Chaos ready to rush. Ooh, that'd be pretty fun. Maybe an 8 dog build, because the poison dogs count differently than the normal ones. If he brings Kolek against Wood Elves, I don't even know what I would do. I would have no response for such a play. If you guys have any mad predictions for what Hadri's is going to bring, I'd be happy to hear. He is a beast. He is a beast. One of the veteran players, actually. Actually, one of the players that I looked up to way back when I was first starting to join the Warhammer multiplayer scene. Hadri's was like, Hadri's was the player, like, well, you know, one of the players that was among the top players, where, you know, I knew if I faced him in combat, I would get absolutely destroyed. Nowadays I have a much better chance, although I did lose round 1 in my own tournament. I can hold my own, at least decently so. Played a few quick battle people, and they were nice compared to custom. Hey, that's good to hear. He played Red Wedding Planner before. Didn't know who he really was. But you know that he hosted a tournament and watched. Wow, Slicker, is that how you found my channel, Red Wedding Planner? Red Wedding Planner, by the way, wonderful person. Gives great ideas for tournaments and also supports myself and the ladder as a whole. So, honestly, I am morally obligated to say nothing bad about him. Quick battles are your thing because you love memes. Ah, yes, it's a really nice, like, you know, if you want to experiment, learn a new faction, quick battles it's pretty nice. The Ent ladder, as it is so lovingly called, is a lot more hardcore than quick battles for sure. But here we go. We are in the Wood Elf vs Chaos match for Killerino. We're seeing, I believe, a bit of a kite build, a cavalry kite build with 3 Glade Riders and 2 units of Way Watchers. Pretty nice, not too terrible. Meanwhile, we got the Spell Singer of Life. We got abilities over there. It's just regrowth. Now that's an interesting choice, probably because there are Sylvan Knights. This is of Twilight coming in fully kitted out on their Eagle. It's a Wild Riders and Sylvan Knights. Now, for those of you that don't know these Sylvan Knights, they got 75% physical resist. More or less indestructible in this game under the right conditions. Meanwhile, for Chaos, we're seeing a surprisingly... No, actually, they do have magic damage. The Dragon Ogres, counters to the Sylvan Knights, are going to do quite well. Lots of infantry to eat up that Wood Elf ammunition. They just, they love munching on it with their shields. Honestly, more of a metaphor, but might be less of a metaphor when you consider the mutations of Chaos. Nevertheless, we also got 5 Marauder Horsemen, and it looks like 2 of them. No, 1 of them Only one. Your lack of symmetry hurts me, Hadries. One of them's going to be a horse master. The rest are here to do a bit of damage, soak some ammo. And overall, the skirmish phase between the horsemen, that can eat up a lot of ammunition for the Wood Elves. Especially because they only committed to 2 Way Watchers, and most of their kite is in their cavalry. So if he spends too long trying to kill off these horsemen, the rest of the Chaos Infantry, they're going to do a lot of cleanup here, especially with the support of the Summoners of Rage. Now, if the Way Watchers do have ammunition in the late game, they will be able to finish them off quite handily, so that's sort of what both players are going to be fighting for. Now, as the battle begins, we're seeing Fire at Will on for the Wood Elves, and some good positioning. Potentially that was intentional, to have Fire at Will on so that they would instantly get off their volley against the horsemen. Seemed like it was, and it did get really nice value right off the bat. 6 models already down, very good for the Wood Elves. Alright, so meanwhile, skirmishers moving along the flanks, they're poking away at Chaos Warriors, but that's a pretty inefficient ammo trade. Sartorial too, he has a lot of missile resist. We're going to take a look at it right here. 50%, 25% magic resist too. Not too many of these Wood Elf units do magic damage, but there we go, the Hagbane tips do. So it'll be mostly 50% resist, which is really nice for Sartorial. Basically makes it not worth it to try sniping him out, and he'll be living for quite some time. Now, these Stag Knights, they do charge in, and they will be getting punished by it, as they hit the infantry, but they will be losing maybe a couple models here as Sartorial countercharges them. Meanwhile, Sisters of Twilight getting harassed a bit by the horsemen, overextending a tiny bit, and the infantry is still pretty comfortable. In the back here, though, the Mirror Guard, very elite unit of Chaos Warriors, getting hit by the Wild Riders, taking a lot of damage on that initial charge. But the Dragon Ogres are coming in to the Stag Knights. So far, Chaos been taking the better trade here against the very elite Wood Elf forces, and the Sisters of Twilight, they're pretty close to routing, which is really bad for the Wood Elves here. The Wild Riders getting caught out too, despite getting their damage on the Chaos Warriors. And really the biggest win I can see so far for the Wood Elves is that the cavalry for Chaos is a little bit weaker than they would hope. The Dragon Ogres potentially overextending too, but Sartorial pushing through the middle might be able to jump onto these range units. We'll have to see how that goes. The Dragon Ogres do pull on back too. Now the Sylvan Knights, one thing that is a pretty big loss for the Wood Elves, they are down to 14 models. That means that they will not be able to heal past about half of their HP, and that is more or less permanent damage on top of them now. Pretty rough overall, but the Wood Elves have stabilized, and that means that they can start getting a lot more value on their skirmishers. But potentially a really big play here. Final Transmutation dropping, it hits the Wild Riders, and they're gonna start dropping like flies, I believe. No, Final Transmutation does not actually hit the same way as Soul Stealer, but Sartorial targeting the Spellsinger of Life, ping-ponging her forwards to actually hit those Wild Riders and taking out 2 models. But overall, a pretty nice split from the Wood Elves. I did not know that. You can actually dodge Final Transmutation after it hits. It's not the same with Soul Stealer, but nevertheless, another really bad trade for the Wood Elves. The the Stag Knights getting hit by the magic damage of the Dragon Ogres. Definitely a really rough time for them for sure. And Sartorial finishing off this Life Caster is a very nice pick for Hadries. There are not a lot of things that can finish off Sartorial here, so he's looking to be in pretty nice shape. Meanwhile, over here, Horsemen coming in directly underneath the Sisters of Twilight. They'll be able to finish them off if they can sustain the constant fire from the Wood Elf cavalry that are shooting in on top of them. It looks like they didn't take too much damage, and since with a bit of juking, the horsemen generally fare pretty well, and they don't take too much damage. Sisters of Twilight, though, are getting really low. Their healing has procced, and it looks like it will be activating in just a second, but it doesn't matter. The Sisters of Twilight are off the battlefield, and that's gonna be a really rough loss for the Wood Elves. About 2,000 gold worth of value. The Dragon Ogres have finished off the Sylvan Knights, and all the range units are backed up into a corner. Very bad position for the Wood Elves to be in now, and I believe Hadri's will be taking a pretty decisive 2-0 victory in this match. There aren't too many ways that the Wood Elves can come back here, but we'll see if there is some sort of crazy potential here. We do have the Sylvan Knights diving on in. Perhaps, maybe, some crazy terror routes could get the infantry off the map. But Sartorial is just at so high HP, and the chances of him getting sniped out definitely quite low. Hadri's definitely strong indeed, guys. Definitely a very strong player, build-wise and in his control, as the Wood Elves do hit army losses. So that's going to be it. Hadri's solid 2-0 victory here today. Going to be doing quite well for himself. The Dragon Ogres paying for themselves almost in full. Sartorial getting in some decent hits too, but really, honestly, it was all the units doing pretty well. They more or less all did their job, and that's a really nice sign for your game. As, you know, if you just throw away your units or have any useless ones, that's generally a bad idea. For the Wood Elves, Sisters of Twilight did get shut down. Sylvan Knights got shut down too. And the Spellsinger of Life also getting completely bonked on the head by Sartorial. It seemed like Hadri's just had a really nice build for the Wood Elf army in this case. So GG's. We will be moving on to the finals now. Okay, you can invite your opponent. 0. All right. So we'll go ahead and change the bracket now. Hadri's moving on up with that 2-0 victory. He will be in the finals facing off against 0 now. And we will see how this goes. I believe overall, let's take a look at Elo actually. That should be pretty fun. If we take a look at the Elo of both players here, they are both very highly ranked. I believe Hadri's sitting at 1100 Elo. Meanwhile, we got 0 sitting at slightly higher at also 1100, but closer to the 1200 value. That's gonna be it's gonna be a slight advantage for 0 here, but overall, I think in general tournaments, I think the favorite to win it most of the time would be Hadri's, just due to his overwhelming experience. But we'll have to see if 0 manages to win the grand finals here today. Hadri's and Skaven, super scary indeed. Yeah, and he can more or less play any faction too. I think he likes to play Dark Elves. I've seen him play Chaos, sometimes Vampire Coast. But he definitely has a wide, sort of a wide faction net. Let's see. Yeah, Final Transmutation, it can be used to isolate targets. But overall, I think the way Soul Stealer works is a little bit better. Right, this isn't Age of Empires 2. 1000 is basically average there. So it got confusing. Oh, Elo wise. Ah, yes, yeah. Oh, and my game crashed. Well, that's unfortunate. That is unfortunate indeed. I guess we will reboot then. Let's go ahead and message the players. Let's see here. Find tournament opponent. What's it? It's Hadri's and 0. There we go. Don't worry about it, guys. Don't worry, we can load back in nice and quickly. Very strange. I've not had a crash like that in a while, but you know, such is the way of Warhammer. Occasionally you will have a little bit of jank. This game is many years old and it's been worked on by many different programmers. And even as a solo programmer, my own code has a lot of problems, so there we go. Now the map is set. The players will be selecting their factions now. We'll see how it goes. Zero, supposedly having his 2 factions ready. I'd expect to see something similar this time around in his pick 2. What was it? Like Beastmen and something? Beastmen and High Elves, I believe. Okay. Looks like internet fixing itself back up. We will be able to finish this tournament. Alright. So should be good. Now, while we wait, how do you guys feel about the new, the new Tzeentch stuff? Beastmen and Wood Elves, alright, pretty good pick. I personally am quite excited to see how Tzeentch does in multiplayer. He has a lot of flying units, a lot that are relatively scary too. The, the aspiring champions on those flying discs. Very, very excited to see how well those units perform. I imagine if they are just the same stats as aspiring champions, but they're flying, I think that's actually pretty scary. As for his massive amount of flamethrowers, I am personally very excited to try some mass ranged builds on Tzeentch. And probably, probably that's it. I think that's going to be my main playstyle with him. Personally, I think he's probably my 3rd most anticipated factions out of the bunch. Probably, Ogre Kingdoms at the top, followed by Cathay, followed by Tzeentch. Those are my top 3. I'm assuming Chaos Dwarves are not coming out when the game releases, based on the heavy hinting that Ogre Kingdoms will be the initial faction at launch. Yes, his campaign mechanics. Oh my gosh, you can just swap. Did you know Tzeentch can just swap settlements around? Ownership of settlements? It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. The amount of things you could do with that are insane. But we will have to wait at least a month and a half before we see it. Oh my gosh, and Lore Master of Sotek in chat today. Hello. Caught me at a good time. We are at the finals now of this tier tournament between the forces of Hadres and Zero. Oh yes, we are talking about Warhammer 3 hype. I saw your video recently too, actually, so that I could catch up on all of the news for Tzeentch and so on. I'm pretty excited to try them out, especially those faction mechanics. Those are crazy juicy. Plus, like, a lot of Winds of Magic interaction. It's gonna be pretty exciting. I'm more excited to try them out in multiplayer though. That should be pretty nice. But yeah, I know what you were thinking of doing. You were thinking of playing Cathay, right? Cathay and oh man, there was another faction. It was a Nurgle guy, right? You said if there was some Nurgle lord, you would be playing Nurgle first. Honestly, I don't know how I feel about Nurgle yet. I feel like it could go very wrong. We might just have another vampire counts on our hands, but it might also be okay. Looking forward to Cathay Mirrors. Ooh, you can reflect missiles back and forth. I had not even considered that. By the way, that missile reflectability, so juicy, so juicy. I am so excited. Meow Ying waifu. All right, pretty cool. Let's see. I feel like, well, actually, okay. Well, most of the guys in Warhammer are either terribly mutated or guys. So, I feel like that is a good choice. You think Nurgle will need a lot of slows and debilitating effects to keep armies engaged in melee? 100%. Nurgle corruption is gonna be so much attrition. I can see it now. Like, you sit in his territory for one turn and then you just lose your entire army. Which is good. It should be a slog trying to go through the lands of Nurgle. But yeah, I think overall I'm excited to see what they do with them. There's a lot of potential there, I feel. I also hope that they give him some sort of bloated corpse unit that is actually playable, because that would be very exciting. Alright, let's see. So I think both players are selecting their factions. It looks like we have a Beastmen versus Empire matchup. Pretty good. Empire, they used to be quite good against the Beastmen. The reason? Well, it's because they got Franz, the destroyer of chariots. They have skirmishers, powder units to shut down the cavalry of Beastmen quite well. And they even have war wagons with enough ammunition to take down a bull. Easy, easy. So, but nowadays, Beastmen, they did get a buff. They had some monsters, which doesn't overall change the matchup too much. Of course, it's generally pretty good for the Beastmen. The chariots will help a little bit, but the Empire have the tools to deal with all the new Beastmen DLC units. And because of that, I would expect things to still be fairly even here. But we'll see if we're wrong once we dive on into the game. Perhaps Hadri's will go another mass infantry build. I'd personally be very excited to see something along those lines. But there's only one way to find out as we log on into the game. Hopefully without lag. It's going to be 0 against Hadri's. Want them to be durable, slow, and have debuffs? That seems about right for an Nurgle. But here we go. What do we have? We got 2 Manticores. We got a Caster and Mogre the Shadowgave. Caster's coming in with Traitorkin and the Bray Scream right over here. Very standard kit. We got Mogre. Chaos Spawn summons, also very standard. Lots of mobility, decent amount of infantry, and 1 unit of Chaos Spawn. This will do well against many of the forces of the Empire. The cavalry will have a hard time shutting this down too, especially with a bit of mobility support in the back lines. And this may be in a good place to overwhelm the Empire. But for Hadri's, what do we have? A fairly small infantry force. Actually, only 5 spears and 2 huntsmen. This is a lot smaller than I am used to for the Empire. So we'll see where the rest of the money was spent. Volkmar, the Grim, a Jade Wizard for healing, and a Warrior Priest. So definitely a very faith-based build here, with 3 units of Demogryph Knights. Not even the Halberd variant. The most elite cavalry you can find, second most elite if you count Halberds, gonna be coming in for the Empire. These guys are deadly scary, and they require a lot to take down. But if you look at their HP, they're sitting at a nice 5,000. And what does that mean? It means that Traitorkin will still be able to do a lot of damage. It won't kill models outright, but it will do a lot of damage. Now, that is probably why Hadri's has decided to go for such a heavy healing build this time around. A lot of damage resist buffs too are going to be helping out the Demogryph Knights. And it's really just a question on how well they'll do, especially against the Manticores, who could potentially rout them off, or even kill off models just by charging. If the Manticores aren't dealt with, it's going to be really rough for the Empire. Oh god. Sorry. My throat is like really dry today. Now, the Huntsmen, they do have anti-large on their range attacks. They will be able to punish the Manticores if they dive on in. But like I said, the Beastmen infantry, they may very well overwhelm this position. Overall, my predictions, I have no idea how this is going to go for either side. If you take a look at the Centaurs though, they are not the great weapon variant. And Demogryph Knights at 125 armor actually won't be taking that much damage from the Centaurs. We would expect them to win that fight quite handily. And it's really going to have to deal with the Manticores and the Bray Shaman of Wild, who is in a very safe position. It'll be very hard to catch him if Zero plays it out correctly. And as the battle gets underway, we're just going to see a little bit of wheeling here on both sides. Now, interesting thing, Hadri's moving up with Volkmar. He knows that Volkmar does not have a lot to fear in this situation, and that means that he can slam on into this infantry to buy his archers a little bit more time. Avoiding the Gore Herd though, instead going for the farther flank, potentially to allow the Demogryph Knights to make a play, as they are still hidden away. The archers getting in a nice volley on the Centaurs too. Going to be getting in good damage. And a Soulfire and Bombardment getting in a juicy hit on the infantry and cavalry there. But the Beastmen, with their overwhelming infantry power, do engage onto the forces of the Empire. Banishment does drop, hits the infantry, gets a lot of damage. They're terror routing. And that means that the Manticore, it is alone, getting surrounded by the Demogryph Knights. It tries to move around, but it cannot. And it's going to be rampaging and stuck in the fight now. Take a look at its HP. It's taking a lot of damage. Razorgore Herd are committed. And the Traderkin is, I believe, dropping. Perhaps not yet. The Chariot not in here just yet. All of the melee defense buffs have been procced. But now that the Traderkin is dropping, it's going to be coming in right as the Shield of Faith is beginning to wear off. Actually, no. Shield of Faith going to be staying just long enough to eat up most of that Traderkin. Does keep the Demogryph Knights in fairly good shape. But the rest of the Empire infantry, like I said, very little spent on them. They're going to be routing off almost immediately. And that means that it is more or less just the Demogryph Knights left here after that initial engagement. Overall, I'd say a pretty rough trade for the forces of Hadri's, but I would not count them out just yet. One of the Manticores did take a lot of damage. You can see it's been routing off towards the edge of the map for a while now rallying in the distance. And these Demogryph Knights, despite being so beat up, they still have quite a bit of oomph in them. Volkmar too is going to be a pretty hard beast to take down, but I don't know if the Empire will be able to do enough. With the Manticore support, Volkmar is going to be taking a lot of damage, and I don't know if the Demogryph Knights can really get in on this blob fight. Another Traderkin could land and take out a lot of those forces. The Demogryph Knights are more or less just trying to find a place to engage, but you can see the Beastmen infantry moving into intercept. They're going to be ready to block up those Demogryph Knights, and even with the Chaos Spawn now beginning to disintegrate, I think the Beastmen more or less have this game. Manticore landing in another hit against Volkmar 2, going to be hurting quite a bit. And the Demogryph Knights, they're going to be trying to get as many good engagements as they can. A really nice Soulfire does drop. That is a potential for a pretty spicy comeback here. Demogryph Knights getting in another good charge on the spears over here. And the potential for terror routes is possible. One unit already routing off the map. These Centaurs routing 2. A really good start for Hadri's, but his Demogryph Knights are really beat up. Another Traderkin could very well drop. And the timer is on since Volkmar, he's been losing more and more HP by the second. Now, more buffs do drop. The Warrior Priest has done pretty well for himself. And a pretty juicy Banishment does drop, hitting up all of the Ungor Raiders, a couple of units of cavalry, and the infantry. Really nice Banishment. But will it be enough? It is a big engagement here. Another Soulfire Bombardment does hit. Does decent damage, but doesn't rout off any of the Beastmen units. And they're beginning to overwhelm the forces of the Empire. Volkmar on the verge of falling here. And it really depends on if the Manticore can finish him off. If he doesn't die here, he might actually be able to survive in the late game and get a lot of damage. But for the Demogryph Knights, they've taken so much damage getting bogged up by this, by the infantry. I don't know if they'll be able to clean up. Volkmar, though, still just barely alive. You can see he's sitting at a solid 300 HP, so it doesn't look like he will be dying unless the Manticore gets engaged. And a lot of the Beastmen infantry are beginning to rout. This is really good for Volkmar for sure. He's diving back on into the infantry, dropping his buffs, but another volley of arrows comes in. Overall, he is healing though. And he is in the safe zone, quote unquote safe zone, as you can barely see his HP bar. He drops again. Looks like he took a hit from the Chaos Spawn, Mogre maybe even poking him. And the Brave Shaman charges in, slams into Volkmar, brings him down to 0 HP. And that's going to be it as Volkmar drops. The Empire forces break. And the Beastmen will be taking the game. GG's called for both players. Zero going to be taking the first win of the finals. Volkmar is basically at regen cap. Yeah, he didn't have much left by the end of the game. Now, pretty interesting build. I think the Demogryph Knights were okay, but they still took a lot of damage from that Traderkin. Another really brutal thing, despite spending so much money on the chevrons for his infantry, they really just crumbled apart extremely quickly, getting flanked and charged by cavalry. You know, just having those Demogryph Knights on the flank, they weren't able to support the infantry, and because of that, they all fell down extremely quickly there. Now, it was good shutting down the Manticores, but they did come in at the last quarter, and there we go. That's the reason why you gotta be careful. Traderkin, absolutely brutal. You gotta make sure that you avoid it in most situations. Now, the game is not over yet. Yeah, Zero's caster. It did better than me hitting the entire Vampire Count's army 3 times. That is something. That is something. Mostly because it does more damage to cavalry. So it's actually more about the targets that you choose than the quantity. I do have a tutorial on that if you guys are interested, but there you go. Hadri's build looked like a meme. But you're not smart enough to understand. Overall, I think it just sort of ran into a bad matchup. The Traderkin was pretty rough, and a bit of the positioning ended up not working for him. Overall, though, it was still pretty close, but Mogre, too, with his Chaos Spawn summons, is particularly strong against armies that like to blob together like that one. Potentially, Hadri's could have used a few more abilities, too, to sort of negate the effect of Traderkin. I think his ward save buffs came in a little bit late. But overall, I think the build, it was favoring the Beastmen there. Could we ban Zero and his Chaos Rush factions? Only if you're the one picking. Zero is pretty strong though, and a pretty nice early lead. We'll see if Hadri's is able to pull it back here in game number 2 though. Now, last time we did see Hadri's going for Chaos as his first pick. I wonder if he will be going for it again. Overall, I think maybe Chaos is pretty nice as a first pick faction nowadays, although a lot of people would say Beastmen is stronger. And there we go, it is going to be Chaos and Dark Elves, so some fan favorite factions of Hadri's. Gonna be a really nice and strong duo here, but what will Zero have to counter? There are a few factions that will do decently here. Greenskins come to mind, and that would actually be really interesting. Greenskins against Chaos. Alternatively, you could go for something like Coast, which would be a little bit risky and not exactly in Zero's playstyle here. Maybe a Norska pick, who knows? Who knows? Only Zero does. Overall, though, I think Chaos Dark Elf seemed like a pretty strong combo. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure. Usually pairing something up with an elf faction. That's something you see pretty often. The elves generally hard counter a good number of factions, but they run into a bunch of hard counters themselves. For example, they will all do well against the vampire counts, but they all do badly against Bretonia. So that's why you usually see these elf pairings. Zero indeed going for the greenskins, and Hadri's looking to prove ice power wrong this day, going for the dark elves. Pretty nice pick, if I do say so myself. And by nice, I mean interesting, because Ice Power has been someone that has frequently said, and Ice Power is a Dark Elf main, even though he says he isn't. He says that this is a terrible matchup for the Dark Elves. Hadri's coming on in today to prove Ice Power wrong, potentially. But honestly, I'm not sure. Greenskins, they did get nerfed as of the last patch, but units like Stone Trolls, you know, their skirmish strength, it's all pretty scary. Even seeing more Dark Elves than High Elves recently, what changed? Absolutely nothing. Cavalry is a little bit stronger. but sort of a side grade rather than a direct buff. So I think it's sort of just the flavor of the month. The pick 2 system does favor factions that do well, like really well in specific matchups. And while High Elves is a generalist faction, Dark Elves have stronger matchups that they can win. So that could be it. Dark Elves, yeah, they did get a buff a while back, but that was a while back. I don't know if that was the main impact here. Played Greenskins a few times, and Dark Elf skirmishers always seem to beat you to death. You do have to be careful. The Dark Riders and Chariots will whittle away your skirmishers slowly over time if you're careful, and very quickly if you're not. So it really depends on how the micro comes down for 0 here. Over the course of a battle, you can generally wear out the Scourge Runner ammo. But the ammunition on Dark Riders will usually last quite a bit longer. So there's definitely a fun dynamic here. I'm not sure if it's completely lost on the end of the Dark Elves, but a lot of players have said that it is very rough for them indeed. Honestly though, I would put my favor in the Greenskins. Hadri's clearly coming in with some pretty fancy builds here today. I wonder what he will take. Now, it is important to note, a lot of us, actually half the players here, are playing in the ECL tomorrow. One of the highest, most prestigious tournaments you could possibly imagine. So, obviously we don't want to be showing off all of our secrets nowadays. So that's something to consider. Something to consider. Hadri's overall might be saving some builds. Could very well. Alternatively, these may very well be the builds we will see in the ECL finals. Now, I will personally say today, my Beastmen game against the Vampire Counts, not a conscious choice. Actually, that was just an accident that resulted in that loss. So, sort of grim bodings for the ECL, but I will still try my best tomorrow. Hopefully it goes well. You heard that Savage Big Guns trade better a while back. Is that still true since they have Frenzy? Savage Big Guns, they're generally better than normal Big Guns. You sort of have different situations for both, but they more or less act as the same unit where Savage Big Guns are slightly better. That's sort of the gist of it. The sort of nuances between them are very fine, but the Savage Orc Big Guns, they do have a bit of their immune to psychology early on because of Frenzy, but the problem is, by the time you're terror routing, your Frenzy is also about running out too, so it doesn't actually matter that much. But yeah, overall, if you want a general rule of thumb, take Savage Orc Big Guns. They will do better. All right. Now, while we wait, I guess I'll just sit back and relax. The players, they are building their armies. Sort of implies Hadri's not bringing in a preset build this time around. Could be sort of freeballing it. Might be deciding to hard counter some very common styles of greenskins. Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the Dark Elves bring here. Sort of the Marathi double Manticore Soul Stealer kite. It's been tried a lot by Ice Power, but that definitely does not work against the standard greenskin playstyle. I'm gonna break out Falcon's old lag switch and get that massive advantage. Did Falcon actually build a lag switch? If he did, that'd be hilarious. Overall, though, I don't think he lags that often in tournaments. Alright. Come on, Hadri's. Come on, we have a series to play now. This might be the last game, so Hadri's obviously taking this with great care. But I can only stall for so long. It was just a joke. Well, sometimes I am completely oblivious to joke. Or to jokes, plural. Lag switch, you mean Chrome? Hey, Chrome isn't that bad. To be honest though, I have a pretty beefed up PC and Chrome eats up a lot of memory. A lot of memory. I do have a million tabs open though, so it's sort of on me. It would be useless in an RTS. Not entirely useless, but generally pretty even for both sides. See, the thing is, it's like, it's the environment you train in, you know? If you train in a laggy environment, it's sort of like you're playing on home field, right? New players come in, they're not used to dealing with the lag, and then you destroy them with your terrain advantage. I don't know. Oh, now I think Hadri's, he might be near the end of his build creation here. As you can see, Zero did unready up, which is a sign that Hadri's overspent on his funds. That's going to be pretty interesting. And yeah, now we wait. Now we wait. All right, so. Let's talk about Lords. Let's talk about Lords in this matchup. Oh no, they are ready. Thank goodness. I had nothing to say about Lords. I've run dry. You guys know who's meta. It could be Marathi, it could be Malekith. If I had to put money down though, I think Hadri's is running Malice Darkblade. I think he would actually run Malice Darkblade here. I'm calling it right now. And then for Zero, well, I can see his army in front of me, so I cannot comment. But overall, Greenskin Lords, Grom, still very strong. Not as good as he was before, but definitely quite still a terror. Now, as we load on into what could be potentially the final games of this finals, I am excited to bring to you, dear viewers, the match on River Amaxon. The match with no river in the battle area, because there is a river in the distance. Which, look at that very nice curving river over there. I believe there was also another river, yep, in the distance, possibly a lake too. Meanwhile, as you can see on the right, a bit of a terrain imperfections, but stalling aside, we are loaded in for the greenskins. It's going to be a very average build. We got the skirmishers here. We got the goblin with some itchy nuisance. Pretty good for a blob fight that happens late game. Grom with his usual kit. And big guns that are not savage. Now these guys, they have armor, which is usually not very useful against the dark elves, but against chaff they will do slightly better. They are cheaper also, which is important if you want to survive longer against kite. Triple stone troll, very strong against what you would expect from the Dark Elves. They have high armor and missile resist to shut down the archers. But for the Dark Elves, let's take a look at what they've brought today. Hadri's coming in with the Beastcaster. Transformation of Kadan, definitely very strong. Very nice for sniping out. What is this? We'll get to this in a second. Transformation of Kadan, very good at sniping out stone trolls. Meanwhile, we got Crone Hellebron. A rare pick, one might say, in this matchup. Coming in with a lot of abilities. Magic resistance, good against only a few units of the greenskins. But the AoE effect of it will protect these very elite witch elves and sisters of slaughter. Meanwhile, Crone Hellebron coming on in with a lot of combat abilities. It looks like she might want to take a fight against the stone trolls this day. So that should be quite exciting. We also have a lot of witch elves into the distance and spears too. Oh man, the Blades of the Blood Queen. Almost a themed build. Themed Hellebron build here for Hadri's. I'm very excited to see how this goes, as he also has some Dark Riders to help chase off units. Now, overall, I think the Dark Elves, they have a pretty even front line against the Greenskins. Maybe slightly better, but the main problem is that the Stone Trolls are vicious. Absolutely vicious here. They'll be able to beat down the spears, because they don't have a lot of armor piercing, and they can potentially even do pretty nice damage against the Witch Elves. Skirmishers too, there is no anti-skirmisher for Hadri's, so that means that the Witch Elves will be taking a lot of fire from these skirmishers early on, and that's going to be pretty rough. Over here on the flanks, these ladies will be safe, but thankfully there aren't too many skirmishers for the greenskins now. Both armies, they will be advancing. Grom taking a peek outside the forest to take stock of the situation. He doesn't even have to dive back on in because this is a full melee Dark Elf army. Skirmishers are getting in their value. And as you can see, the greenskins are taking this opportunity to avoid an engagement for as long as they can so that the skirmishers can get their value in. At the moment, they are getting pretty nice value, shooting at the Witch Elves and the Sisters. Well, actually, mostly the Witch Elves in this situation. They've already chunked them down. At least a couple models here and there. Yeah, only a couple models. Literally 2 have fallen so far. And the Dark Riders have revealed themselves. Now, they don't want to get engaged just yet, as they will get absolutely torn apart by the trolls. That's definitely going to be a bad decision. But right now, I'm sort of worried about Hadri's infantry. They have taken a lot of damage here, almost to the point where the skirmishers have paid for themselves. But it doesn't matter if he can win this fight decisively. And it seems like Hellebron, very eager to get in combat. She's been diving forwards, doing a bit of dodging herself. Not going to be taking as much damage from the skirmishers, but taking a look at these Witch Elves, they've definitely taken quite the beating so far. The Dark Riders have come on in though, and they're going to be acting as a little bit of anti-skirmish in this fight. Meanwhile, Hellebron moving into combat. Grom deciding against the fight there, instead going to be supporting against the Dark Riders. And the fighting now begins. The Witch Elves lined up in a group of 4 are going to be moving on into combat now. They'll be able to grind down the greenskin infantry very well. And a nice surround here from Hadri's. He got a charge in the back with the Dark Riders, and these ones staying just long enough for the spears to start pulling those Goblin Forest Riders off their cavalry. So that's going to be a really nice initial trade. Taking out those skirmishers is really good. But the main question now, can Hellebron do well against Stone Trolls? She throws down the big buff here onto the Sisters of Slaughter. Insane melee attack values, rampages all around. The goblins are routing. The big guns on the verge of routing, but not just yet. But Hellebron getting surrounded by the Stone Trolls is going to be a pretty scary situation for her. If, for all the damage that she takes, she does not have any ability to heal it up. So already losing about a quarter of her HP, gonna be making Hadri's a little bit nervous. Meanwhile, over here, Grom gonna be charging into the backs of the Hargoneth Executioners. That's gonna be a lot of value on Grom on initial impact. You can see already getting in pretty good damage there on those Executioners. Didn't rampage himself since he is at such high HP, and I believe this is a Flock of Doom hitting the infantry. But one of the main problems, the Stone Trolls, looking to be extremely difficult to take down. 2 of them at basically full HP, and 1 of them still at max models. This means that they will be regenerating pretty hard here in this match. And Hellebron, although she manages to plow through a couple of units of infantry, she's starting to see a little bit of wear. Greenskins now ahead on the balance of power, despite the Manticore summon being in play too. It looks like it's going to try to hunt down Grom, but his very fast speed is going to be keeping him safe. Manticore even being left there. A little bit of a miss-micro. Grom routing off the Witch Elves, and Hellebron routing off the Shaman. Now, while both chariots have done a decent amount of damage, Hellebron is now at half HP, and the Stone Trolls are still alive. And that's going to be really rough for them indeed. Grom moving back into combat. The Manticore looking to rout off one of the Stone Troll units. That's going to be one of them down. And that's only 1/3 of the way there for Hadri's, and the Trolls have not even routed off yet. Meanwhile, Hellebron now rampaging herself, looking for targets to take, but the Executioners now falling. And it seems like it's going to be a pretty rough day for the Dark Elves indeed. Now, there are some potential comebacks for them to make here, but it's mostly going to involve taking out Grom. Grom looking for an engagement against Hellebon. If you look at their combat stats, Grom actually slightly better there with higher charge bonus too. He's going to be happy to take this fight, but heroic killing blow and some buffs getting dropped by Hellebon gonna be helping her fight against Grom. But some supporting fire from the Night Goblin Shaman. He actually does rally here at the late stages of the battle, and he's gonna be helping in this fight too. Grom barely getting scratched up here, showing that he is still a worthy war boss, using his lucky banner to keep him safe. And Hellebon now surrounded by trolls. She's gonna be having a hard time, and it looks like she will be routing off, but she does stabilize. Her leadership does go back up, and she might stay just long enough in this battle to die valiantly. Meanwhile, the spears in the distance are going to be getting hit by these rallying stone trolls. That's going to be rough for them. Grom did take quite a bit of damage in that prolonged fight against Hellebon, but if you look at her leadership, she is down to 10 and only 400 HP left. That means one more hit is going to be finishing her off, and I think this game is looking to be finished. Neckbat saying it's not a true Dark Elf game without Ice Power saying it's over from the start. I know, I miss him, but sadly he was not able to make it today. And that's gonna be game for the Greenskins, winning it this time around 0, taking a nice 2-0 victory off of Hadries, and they will also be winning the $25 prize for the tournament today. Very nice win there. Slicker Masher with the $5 donation too. Thank you very much. Hugely appreciated. And that's gonna be it. Let's take a look at a few values here. Stone Trolls doing amazingly. Same with Grom. Very much expected. And sadly, the Dark Elves, all of their very elite infantry, just weren't really able to do enough. Except for the Sisters of Slaughter, who actually did do decently. Now, that's gonna be it for today. I will be closing off the stream, potentially making a few more of those juicy short videos, as they have been doing terribly well. And by terribly, I mean amazingly well on the channel so far. But before we close off, special thanks to our supporters today. Slicker Masher, who had just recently donated the $5, and Adobe, who actually became a member on the channel. For some memberships at the higher tier, you can actually get some one-on-one replay review if you are looking to become a better player. And last but not least, our growing list of patrons who support the Ent Ladder that is actually still growing. We recently had almost 100 games played the other day, which is absolutely amazing. I hope to one day contest even the quick battle system that CA have. But for now, thank you very much to the sponsors: Brandon Wagner, Romacarol, Bunny Arquette, and AC Maiden, and also Biblington, Jay Phoenix, Alex Macabre, and Eli. Your support is hugely appreciated, guys, and for everyone watching, I hope to see you next time. Oh, where is the thing? I need to close the thing. There we go.